The scrub brush bit into Violet Thompson's raw knuckles as she worked the grimy floorboards of the Lucky Dollar Saloon, her fourth hour on her hands and knees that morning in Silver Peak, Nevada. And she knew she still had the bar to polish, the spittoons to empty, and the upstairs rooms to clean before the evening crowd arrived. It was 1878, and Violet had been working at the saloon for 3 months now, ever since she had arrived in Silver Peak with nothing but the clothes on her back and $5 sewn into her petticoat. Her father had died of cholera back in Missouri, her mother 2 years before that, and her only living relative, an uncle, had made it clear she was not welcome in his home unless she agreed to marry his business partner, a man of 50 with wandering hands and whiskey breath. So Violet had taken what little she had and bought a train ticket west, hoping to find work as a schoolteacher or seamstress in one of the mining towns sprouting up across Nevada. But Silver Peak had no need for a schoolteacher. The dozen or so children in town learned their letters from the preacher's wife, and the seamstress position had been filled years ago by a formidable woman named Mrs. Chen, who made it clear she needed no help. The only work available for a woman alone was at the Lucky Dollar, and though Violet had hesitated, knowing the reputation such establishments carried, she had no choice. It was work at the saloon or starve. The floor stretched before her, sticky with spilled beer and tracked in mud from the previous night. Her back ached, her shoulders burned, and her hands were chapped and bleeding in places despite the lye soap she used sparingly. She was 20 years old and felt twice that age most days. "You missed a spot there, girl," called out Sal Hendricks, the saloon owner, from behind the bar. He was counting last night's take, his thick fingers moving over the coins with surprising dexterity. "And when you finish that, the brass needs polishing. We have got standards here." Violet bit back a retort and dipped her brush in the bucket again. The water was gray now, filthy with the grime she had scrubbed up. She had standards too once. She had dreamed of teaching children, of having a small house with a garden, of maybe finding a kind man to marry and building a life together. Now her dreams consisted of a full night's sleep and a day when her hands did not hurt. The saloon doors swung open, letting in a blast of September heat and desert dust. Violet did not look up. She had learned in her time here to keep her head down and her eyes on her work. The men who frequented the Lucky Dollar were miners mostly, rough and lonely, and while Sal ran a relatively respectable establishment compared to some, that did not mean much. The saloon girls who worked the evening shift, serving drinks and dancing with customers, were expected to be friendly and flirtatious. Violet was grateful her work kept her in the background, scrubbing and cleaning, largely invisible. "Can I help you?" Sal's voice had taken on a different tone, respectful and slightly wary. "I am looking for a woman who works here, Violet Thompson." Violet froze, her brush hovering over the floorboards. The voice was deep and unfamiliar, with a slight drawl that marked the speaker as someone who had spent time in Texas or Oklahoma. Why would anyone be looking for her? Her uncle could not have tracked her all the way to Nevada, could he? Her heart began to pound. Violet. She is right there, scrubbing the floor. But she is not one of the working girls, if you understand my meaning. She just cleans. I understand perfectly. Footsteps approached, boots that sounded expensive on the board she had just cleaned. Violet finally looked up, shading her eyes against the light from the doorway. The man standing above her was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build. He wore a dark gray shirt, black vest, and well-made trousers tucked into polished boots. A black hat sat on his head, pushed back far enough that she could see his face. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with strong features, a firm jaw shadowed with stubble, and striking green eyes that studied her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Violet Thompson?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, setting down her brush and starting to rise. Her knees protested after so long on the hard floor. "Stay there a moment." He crouched down beside her, bringing himself to her level, which surprised her. Most men would have kept standing, forcing her to crane her neck. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, marks from squinting in the sun. His face was tanned, his hands strong and work roughened despite his obviously expensive clothing. "My name is Adam Garrett. I own a ranch about 5 miles north of town." Violet had heard of the Garrett Ranch. Everyone in Silver Peak had. It was one of the largest cattle operations in this part of Nevada, with thousands of head of cattle and dozens of employees. The Garretts were wealthy, or as wealthy as anyone got in this hard-scrabble territory, and they kept mostly to themselves. "I do not understand, sir. Why are you looking for me? Your mother was Margaret Thorne before she married, was she not?" Violet's breath caught. "Yes, sir. Did you know her?" "No, but my mother did. They were childhood friends back in Kentucky, before your mother's family moved to Missouri. My mother received word through mutual acquaintances about Margaret's passing, and later about your father's death. She has been trying to locate you for several months." "I do not understand," Violet repeated. Her mind was reeling. Her mother had rarely spoken of her childhood in Kentucky, and Violet had never heard the name Garrett. "My mother would like to explain everything herself, but the short version is that she promised your mother, years ago, that if anything ever happened to her, our family would look after you. She takes such promises seriously." Adam Garrett's green eyes moved from Violet's face to her raw hands, then to the bucket of dirty water and the scrub brush. Something flickered in his expression, something that might have been anger, though not directed at her. "How long have you been working here?" "3 months, sir. And before that, I came straight to Silver Peak after my father died. I hoped to find work as a teacher, but there were no positions available." Adam Garrett stood, his jaw tight. He turned to Sal Hendricks, who was watching the exchange with undisguised curiosity. "What do you pay her?" Sal shifted uncomfortably. "That is between me and my employee, Mr. Garrett. What do you pay her?" Adam's voice had not risen, but there was steel in it now. "Room and board and $3 a week," Sal said defensively. "That is fair wages for cleaning work. Room and board." "Where does she sleep?" Sal jerked his thumb toward the back. "There is a storage room back there. It has a cot." Violet felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. Yes, she slept in a windowless storage room barely larger than a horse stall, surrounded by crates of liquor and spare furniture. But it was a roof over her head, and she had been grateful for it. Adam Garrett was quiet for a long moment, and Violet watched emotions play across his face. Finally, he looked down at her, and his expression softened. "You are done here." "I beg your pardon," Violet said. "You are done here," he repeated. "Get your things. You are coming with me." "Now wait just a minute," Sal protested. "She works for me. She cannot just walk out in the middle of the day." Adam pulled out a leather wallet and extracted several bills, tossing them on the bar. "That is for any inconvenience. Miss Thompson is finished with this work." Violet's head was spinning. This was all happening too fast. "Sir, I cannot just leave. I have nowhere to go." "You have somewhere to go," Adam said firmly. "My mother has had a room prepared for you at the ranch. You will stay with us until we can figure out what you want to do with your future. But you will not spend another night in a storage room, and you will not scrub another floor in this saloon." There was something in his voice, a combination of determination and kindness, that made Violet want to cry. She could not remember the last time anyone had spoken to her with such consideration. had looked at her and seen a person rather than just a pair of hands to do unpleasant work. But she was also frightened. She did not know this man or his mother. What if this was some kind of trap? Adam seemed to sense her hesitation. I understand you have no reason to trust me, but I give you my word as a Garrett that you will be treated with complete respect in our home. My mother is a good woman, and she genuinely wants to help you. If you are uncomfortable with the arrangement after a few days, I will personally help you find other respectable employment in town. But please, let us at least offer you what my mother promised your mother all those years ago. Violet looked down at her raw hands, at the bucket of filthy water, at the vast expanse of floor still waiting to be scrubbed. She thought about the storage room with its musty smell, and the way the walls seemed to press in on her at night. She thought about Sal's increasingly inappropriate comments and the way some of the miners looked at her. She thought about her mother, who had been so kind and gentle, and tried to imagine her as a young girl in Kentucky with a friend named Garrett. "All right," she said quietly. "Let me get my things." The storage room took only minutes to clear out. Everything Violet owned fit into a single carpet bag that had belonged to her mother. 3 dresses, all worn and patched, 2 chemises, 1 pair of spare stockings with holes at the heels, a brush with several teeth missing, a small degria type of her parents on their wedding day, and a locket that had been her grandmother's, the only thing of value she possessed. When she emerged, Adam was waiting by the door. He had settled up with Sal, who was glowering but apparently had been paid enough not to make a real fuss. Adam took her bag without asking, which Violet found both presumptuous and oddly gentlemanly, and held the door for her. Outside, the September sun was bright and hot, the main street of Silver Peak bustling with afternoon activity. Miners heading to and from the Silver Peak mine, which had given the town its name. Freight wagons delivering supplies. A few women in respectable dresses shopping at the general store, women who had never acknowledged Violet when they saw her because she worked at the saloon. Adam led her to a beautiful chestnut horse tied to the hitching post, along with a smaller gray mare. "Do you ride?" he asked. "Not really, sir. I mean, I have ridden farm horses before, but I am not experienced." "Then you will ride with me. We will have someone come back for the second horse later." He secured her carpet bag to his saddle, then turned to her. "I am going to help you up, all right," Violet nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Adam's hands on her waist were firm but respectful as he lifted her easily onto the horse, then swung up behind her. She found herself enclosed by his arms as he gathered the reins, and she stiffened instinctively. "Just relax," he said quietly. "I have got you, you will not fall." They rode out of Silver Peak at an easy pace, heading north across the high desert landscape. The September heat was dry and intense, but after the close, smoky atmosphere of the saloon, Violet found it almost refreshing. Sagebrush and scrub dotted the landscape, and in the distance, mountains rose against the impossibly blue sky. "Tell me about yourself," Adam said after they had ridden in silence for a while. "My mother knows what happened to your parents, but not much else." Violet was very aware of his solid presence behind her, the warmth of his chest against her back. It had been so long since anyone had touched her, even in this impersonal way, that she found herself fighting conflicting urges to lean back into his strength and pull away entirely. "There is not much to tell," she said. "I grew up in Missouri. My father was a farmer. We had a small place, nothing fancy, but it was enough. My mother taught me to read and write and do sums. She wanted me to be a teacher. That was her dream for me. What is your dream for yourself?" The question surprised Violet. No one had asked her that in a very long time. "I suppose the same thing. I like children. I like books and learning. I thought I could make a difference as a teacher, help children have better lives than their parents did. Is that foolish? Not at all. It is admirable. They rode in silence for a while longer. The landscape gradually changed as they approached the Garrett ranch, the scrub giving way to grassland where cattle grazed in scattered groups. Violet saw several cowboys in the distance, working with the herds, too far away to make out clearly. "How big is your ranch?" she asked. "About 20,000 acres. We run around 3,000 head of cattle, mostly beef stock that we drive to the railhead in Reno twice a year. My father started the ranch 15 years ago when this was all still rough territory. He built it from nothing. He must be a remarkable man." Adam was quiet for a moment. He was. He died last year, thrown from a horse, broke his neck. It was quick, at least. "I am so sorry," Violet said softly. "I know what it is like to lose a father." "Yes, you do." His voice was gentle. "My mother took it hard. She loved him very much. I think part of the reason she was so determined to find you was that it gave her a purpose, something to focus on besides her grief." The ranch house came into view as they crested a low rise, and Violet caught her breath. It was beautiful, a sprawling two-story structure built of wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Outbuildings dotted the landscape around it, barns and bunkhouses and corrals. Trees had been planted around the house, cottonwoods that provided shade and a touch of green in the arid landscape. A garden flourished on one side, improbably lush. "It is beautiful," Violet whispered. "My mother's doing, mostly. My father built the house, but she made it a home." They rode up to the house, and before Adam could dismount, the front door opened and a woman emerged onto the porch. She was perhaps in her late 40s, still beautiful, with dark hair threaded with silver and the same striking green eyes as her son. She wore a simple but well-made dress in deep blue, and her face lit up when she saw them. "You found her," she exclaimed, hurrying down the porch steps with a grace that belied her age. Adam dismounted and turned to help Violet down. Her legs were shaky after the ride, unused to sitting in a saddle even for so short a journey. The woman came straight to her and took both of Violet's hands in hers, seemingly oblivious to how dirty and chapped they were. "My dear girl," she said, and there were tears in her eyes. "I am Lucky Garrett. You look so much like your mother. She was so beautiful, and so are you." Violet found herself blinking back tears. "Thank you for your kindness, madam, but I do not understand. Why did you search for me? My mother has been gone for 2 years. Alina's hands tightened on hers. "When your mother and I were girls, we were as close as sisters. We told each other everything, shared all our dreams and fears. When her family moved away, we promised to stay in touch, and we did for a while. But then life happened. I married and moved west. She married your father. The letters became less frequent and eventually stopped. But I never forgot her. And when I heard through an old friend that she had died, and later that your father had died too, I knew I had to find you. Margaret once made me promise, in one of those earnest girlhood pacts, that if anything ever happened to her and she left a daughter behind, I would make sure that daughter was cared for. At the time, we were both 14 and thought such promises terribly romantic and tragic. But a promise is a promise. You have gone to so much trouble," Violet said, overwhelmed. "It was no trouble at all, and now that you are here I intend to make up for lost time. Come inside. You must be exhausted and hungry. When did you last eat a proper meal?" Violet could not remember. Sal had provided meals of a sort, but they had been meager, usually scraps from whatever he had made for himself. "I am not sure, madam." Alina made a distressed sound and put an arm around Violet's shoulders, guiding her toward the house. "Well, we will remedy that immediately." "Adam," Have someone take care of the horses, and get Lewis to ride back to town for the other mount." "Already done, Mother," Adam said with a hint of amusement in his voice. The inside of the house was as beautiful as the outside, with polished wood floors, comfortable furniture, and windows that let in abundant light. It was clean but lived in, a real home rather than a showplace. Alina led Violet through a parlor and dining room to a large kitchen where a Mexican woman was working at a huge cast-iron stove. "Rosa, this is Miss Violet Thompson, who I told you about. She will be staying with us. Could you prepare a plate for her and draw a bath upstairs in the guest room?" Rosa, a stout woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun, smiled warmly. "Of course, Senora Garrett. Welcome, Miss Thompson." "Thank you," Violet managed. Alina guided her to a chair at the large kitchen table. "Sit, please. You look ready to collapse." "Rosa makes the best food in 3 counties. You are about to have your first decent meal in months, I suspect." Violet sank into the chair, and it was so comfortable compared to the hard surfaces she had been sitting and kneeling on for the past 3 months that she nearly wept. Alina sat across from her, studying her with those intelligent green eyes. "I know this is all very sudden and strange," Alina said gently. "You do not know us and you have no reason to trust us beyond my word, but I want you to know that you are safe here. You are our guest, not a servant. You will have your own room, your meals, and your freedom to come and go as you please. All I ask is that you give us a chance to help you find your footing. And if, after some time, you decide you want to pursue teaching or some other path, we will help you with that too." "I do not know what to say," Violet whispered. "This morning I was scrubbing floors and now I am sitting in a beautiful house being offered kindness by strangers. It does not seem real." "It is real," Alina assured her, "and you deserve it. You deserve so much more than what you have been through. My son tells me you were sleeping in a storage room at that saloon." Violet nodded, feeling her cheeks flush with shame. "That ends now," Alina said firmly. "No daughter of Margaret Thorne will ever sleep in a storage room again while I have breath in my body." Rosa brought over a plate piled high with food. Roasted chicken, potatoes with butter, green beans, fresh bread still warm from the oven. The smell alone made Violet's stomach clench with hunger. She picked up her fork with trembling hands and took a bite of chicken. It was tender and seasoned with herbs, the best thing she had tasted in longer than she could remember. "Slowly," Alina cautioned. "You have not been eating well. Do not make yourself sick." Violet nodded and forced herself to eat at a measured pace, even though she wanted to devour everything on the plate. Alina sat with her, making gentle conversation about the ranch and the area, not pressing for more information about Violet's circumstances. Adam came in at some point and helped himself to coffee, leaning against the counter and watching his mother with fond amusement. "Mother, try not to completely overwhelm her on the first day," he said. "I am not overwhelming anyone," Alina protested. "I am simply being welcoming. She has barely been here an hour, and you have already planned out the next month of her life." "I have not. You told Rosa to prepare the blue bedroom, which means you are planning for her to stay long-term since that is the nicest guest room. You also mentioned teaching, which means you are already thinking about how to help her pursue that career. And I heard you tell Carlos to bring in the dresses from the attic, which means you are already planning to alter Mother's old clothes to fit Violet." Alina waved a dismissive hand. "I am simply being practical. The girl needs clothes and a place to sleep and a future. There is no harm in addressing those needs." Adam caught Violet's eye and gave her a slight smile, and Violet found herself smiling back despite her exhaustion and confusion. There was something charming about the easy affection between mother and son, the gentle teasing that spoke of a deep bond. After Violet had eaten as much as she could, which was less than half the plate despite her hunger, Eleanor led her upstairs to the blue bedroom. It was beautiful, with a large bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a wardrobe, a dresser with a mirror, and windows that looked out over the ranch. A copper tub had been placed near the fireplace, steam rising from the hot water Rosa had poured into it. "Take your time," Eleanor said. "There is soap and towels on the chair. When you are finished, you will find a nightgown and robe laid out on the bed. Rest as long as you need. We will not disturb you." After Eleanor left, closing the door softly behind her, Violet stood in the middle of the room and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning, she had been on her hands and knees scrubbing a saloon floor, facing another day of thankless drudgery. Now she was in a beautiful bedroom about to take a hot bath, with a soft bed waiting for her and people who seemed genuinely concerned for her welfare. She undressed slowly, her work-roughened hands fumbling with buttons and laces. When she sank into the hot water, she could not hold back a small sob of relief. The heat soaked into her aching muscles, and she scrubbed herself with the lavender-scented soap until her skin was pink and clean. She washed her hair twice, working out the grime and the smell of the saloon that had permeated it. When she finally emerged and dried herself with the soft towels, she felt like a different person. The nightgown waiting for her was finer than anything she had ever worn, soft white cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. She pulled it on along with the robe and sat on the edge of the bed, intending to just rest for a moment. She woke to darkness outside the windows and soft lamplight in the room. Someone had been in and lit a lamp on the dresser, setting it low so as not to disturb her. Violet sat up, disoriented, and realized she had slept for hours. The sun had set, and night had fallen over the ranch. There was a soft knock on the door. "Miss Thompson, are you awake?" It was Eleanor's voice. "Yes, madam. Please come in." Eleanor entered carrying a tray. "I thought you might be hungry. You slept through dinner, which is perfectly understandable given how exhausted you must have been. I brought you soup and bread." "You did not have to do that," Violet protested, though the smell of the soup made her mouth water. "Of course I did. You are my guest." Eleanor set the tray on the small table by the window and lit another lamp. "How are you feeling?" "Overwhelmed," Violet admitted. "But grateful. So very grateful." Eleanor sat in the chair across from her as Violet ate the soup, which was rich and hearty, full of vegetables and beef. "I know this is all strange and sudden, but I meant what I said earlier. You are safe here and you are welcome to stay as long as you need. There is no pressure, no expectations beyond that. You allow yourself to rest and recover from what you have been through." Violet set down her spoon. "May I ask you something, madam?" "Of course. And please call me Eleanor." "Why did you not look for me sooner, after my mother died?" Eleanor's face filled with sadness. "I only learned of her death 6 months ago. The friend who wrote to me had heard through another friend, and the news was already a year old by the time it reached me. I immediately began trying to locate you. I wrote to the town in Missouri where I knew your family had lived, and it took months to get a response. When I finally learned that you had headed west to Nevada, I asked Adam to make inquiries in every town within traveling distance. It took him another 2 months to track you to Silver Peak. I am so sorry it took so long. If I had known sooner, you never would have had to work at that saloon." "It was not your fault," Violet said, "and you did find me. That is what matters." They talked for a while longer, Eleanor sharing stories about Violet's mother as a young girl, tales that made Violet laugh and cry in equal measure. When Violet began to yawn, Eleanor took the tray and bade her good night, promising that tomorrow they would discuss more permanent arrangements. Alone again, Violet climbed into the soft bed and pulled the quilt up to her chin. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the night sky, more stars than she had ever seen in Missouri. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. She thought about Adam Garrett walking into the saloon that morning, crouching down beside her on the floor, and saying those words that had changed everything. "You are done here." She fell asleep wondering what tomorrow would bring. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet routine and growing comfort. Violet woke each morning in the soft bed, still half convinced she would open her eyes to find herself back in the storage room at the Lucky Dollar. But each morning, she found herself in the blue bedroom with sunshine streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee and breakfast drifting up from downstairs. Alina had not exaggerated about the dresses from the attic. She brought up an entire trunk of clothing, gowns she had worn years ago that were still in excellent condition. With Rosa's help, they spent an afternoon altering several dresses to fit Violet's slightly smaller frame. For the first time in months, Violet wore dresses that fit properly, that were not patched and faded from too many washings. She met the ranch hands gradually. Louis, the foreman, was a quiet man in his 50s who had worked for Adam's father from the beginning. Carlos and Miguel were younger, brothers who worked with the horses and cattle. There were a dozen other hands, some who lived in the bunkhouse and others who rode in from homesteads nearby. All of them treated Violet with a respectful courtesy that was a stark change from what she had experienced in Silver Peak. Adam himself was often out working on the ranch during the day, but Violet saw him at meals and in the evenings. He was quieter than his mother, more reserved, but there was a kindness in him that she found herself drawn to. He answered her questions about ranch life with patience, and he never made her feel foolish for her ignorance about cattle and horses. On her 4th day at the ranch, Violet ventured out to explore the grounds. The September weather was beautiful, the heat of summer fading into the cooler days of autumn. She walked through Alina's garden, admiring the vegetables and herbs that flourished despite the arid climate. She watched the cowboys working in the corrals, breaking horses and moving cattle. She was standing by one of the corrals, watching Adam work with a young horse, when he noticed her and rode over. He dismounted in one fluid motion, leading the horse by the reins. "You are looking better," he said, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "More rested." "I feel much better, thank you. Your mother has been so kind. She likes having someone to fuss over. I think she missed having a daughter. Did your parents only have you?" "I have a sister, Catherine. She is married and living in San Francisco. They hoped for more children, but it was not meant to be." He paused, stroking the horse's neck. "What about you? Did you have siblings?" "No, it was just me. My mother had difficult pregnancies. I almost killed her when I was born. The doctor said she could not have more children." They stood in companionable silence for a moment. The horse nuzzled Adam's shoulder, and he absently patted its nose. He was dusty from work, his shirt clinging to him with sweat, but there was something undeniably attractive about him like this in his element. "What are your plans?" Adam asked. "Now that you have had some time to rest and think." "I do not know," Violet admitted. "Your mother has been so generous, but I cannot impose on her hospitality forever. I need to find work to build a life for myself." "You are not imposing. My mother genuinely enjoys having you here, but I understand the need to feel like you are moving forward." He paused, seeming to consider his words. "There is going to be a town council meeting next week. They are discussing hiring a teacher for Silver Peak. The preacher's wife is pregnant and can no longer manage the children alone. I could put in a word for you if you would like." Violet's heart leaped. "Do you think they would consider me? I have no formal training, only what my mother taught me." You can read and write and do mathematics. You are patient and kind. That is more than many teachers have. And the fact that you want to do it matters. Too many people see teaching as a last resort. You see it as a calling. I would be grateful for any help you could provide, Violet said earnestly. Teaching is what I have always wanted to do. Adam smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to something more, something that made Violet's breath catch. Then I will speak to the council. I cannot promise anything, but the Garrett name carries some weight in Silver Peak. If I vouch for you, they will at least give you a fair hearing. Thank you, Violet said softly, for everything. You changed my life when you walked into that saloon. I do not know how I will ever repay you. You do not need to repay me, Adam said. Seeing you healthy and happy is payment enough. Their eyes met and held, and Violet felt something shift between them, some subtle change in the air that made her pulse quicken. She had been so focused on surviving, on getting through each day, that she had not thought about men or attraction or the possibility of romance. But looking at Adam now, at the way the afternoon sun caught in his dark hair and the strength evident in every line of his body, she felt a flutter of something she had not felt in a very long time. Adam cleared his throat and looked away first. I should get back to work. This horse still needs more training. Of course, I did not mean to disturb you. You are not a disturbance, he said quietly, then led the horse back into the corral. Violet walked back to the house in a daze, her mind churning. She could not be developing feelings for Adam Garrett. That would be foolish and inappropriate. He had rescued her out of kindness because his mother had asked him to, not because he had any particular interest in her as a woman. And even if he did, she had nothing to offer a man like him. He was wealthy, established, the owner of a vast ranch. She was a nobody from Missouri who had been scrubbing floors in a saloon a week ago. But despite her rational thoughts, she could not stop thinking about the way he had looked at her, the warmth in his voice when he said she was not a disturbance. The following week, true to his word, Adam took Violet to the town council meeting. She wore one of Alina's altered dresses, a deep green that brought out the color of her eyes, and Alina had helped her arrange her hair in a simple but elegant style. She was nervous as they rode into Silver Peak in Adam's wagon, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. You will do fine, Adam assured her. Just be yourself. Answer their questions honestly. They need a teacher and you need work. It is a mutually beneficial arrangement. The meeting was held in the church, a small wooden building on the edge of town. The council consisted of 5 men, the preacher among them, all established businessmen in Silver Peak. They regarded Violet with varying degrees of skepticism as Adam introduced her. Gentlemen, this is Miss Violet Thompson. She is interested in the teaching position. The Thompson girl who was working at the Lucky Dollar, one of the men said, and there was distaste in his voice. Violet felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, Adam spoke, his voice cool and firm. Miss Thompson was employed at the saloon as a cleaning woman, not as one of the working girls. She arrived in Silver Peak seeking respectable employment and took the only position available to her. She is staying with my mother and me now, and I can personally vouch for her character and abilities. The preacher, a kind-faced man named Reverend Thomas, leaned forward. Can you read and write, Miss Thompson? Yes, sir. My mother was educated and she taught me from a young age. I can read at an advanced level and my penmanship is clear. I am also proficient in mathematics through algebra and geometry. The council members exchanged glances. Another man, whom Adam had identified as the owner of the general store, spoke up. What experience do you have teaching? I do not have formal experience, sir, Violet admitted. But I helped my mother teach younger children in our community in Missouri. I enjoy working with children, and I am patient. I believe every child deserves an education regardless of their circumstances. They asked more questions about her background, her religious affiliation, her willingness to maintain discipline in the classroom. Violet answered each question as honestly as she could, feeling Adam's steady presence beside her like an anchor. Finally, Reverend Thomas spoke again. I think Miss Thompson would be an excellent choice. She is clearly educated and articulate, and she has the character we are looking for in someone to educate our children. I move that we offer her the position. One by one, the other council members agreed, though the man who had initially questioned her employment at the Lucky Dollar did so grudgingly. They would pay her $25 a month, plus room and board in a small house behind the church. She would be expected to teach children aged 6 to 14, 5 days a week, and help with Sunday school. When they emerged from the church into the fading afternoon light, Violet felt like she was floating. I cannot believe it. I have a teaching position, a real teaching position. Adam was grinning, and she had never seen him look so pleased. You earned it. You impressed them with your intelligence and your sincerity. I could not have done it without you, Violet said. They would never have even considered me if you had not vouched for me. Perhaps. But you are the one who convinced them you were the right person for the job. You should be proud of yourself. They celebrated that night at the ranch with a special dinner. Rosa prepared Violet's favorite dishes, and Alina opened a bottle of wine that had been saved for special occasions. They toasted Violet's new position, and Alina became misty-eyed talking about how proud Violet's mother would have been. When do you start? Alina asked. In 2 weeks. That gives Reverend Thomas's wife time to prepare me and get the schoolhouse in order. You will be living in town then, Alina said, and there was sadness in her voice. I am going to miss having you here. I will visit, Violet promised. Often. You have done so much for me, I do not want to lose touch. Later that evening, Violet found herself on the porch, looking out over the darkened ranch. The stars were brilliant overhead, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage and grass. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Adam approaching. May I join you? He asked. Of course. He leaned against the porch railing beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars. Are you excited? Adam asked. About teaching? Yes, and terrified. What if I am not good at it? What if the children do not listen to me? They will listen. You have a natural authority about you, a quiet strength. You will be an excellent teacher. You have a lot of faith in me. I do, he said simply. I have seen what you are capable of. You survived circumstances that would have broken many people. You maintained your dignity and your hope even when you had every reason to give up. That takes strength of character. Violet felt tears prick her eyes. You barely know me. I know enough. He turned to face her fully, and in the starlight, his eyes were very green and very serious. Violet, I need to tell you something, and I hope it does not make you uncomfortable or jeopardize our friendship. Her heart began to pound. What is it? When I walked into that saloon and saw you on your hands and knees scrubbing the floor, with your hands raw and your spirit nearly broken, something happened to me. I have not been able to stop thinking about you since. At first I told myself it was just concern, just wanting to help someone in need. But this past week, watching you recover and bloom, seeing you smile and laugh, getting to know you, I have realized it is more than that. I am falling in love with you. Violet stared at him, unable to speak. Of all the things she had expected him to say, a declaration of love was not one of them. I know it is too soon, Adam continued, speaking quickly now as if afraid he would lose his nerve. I know you have been through so much and you need time to find your footing. I am not asking for anything from you. I just needed you to know how I feel. And if you do not feel the same way, or if you never feel the same way, I will respect that. I just could not let you leave without telling you the truth." Violet's mind was reeling. She thought about the past week, about the way her heart had fluttered whenever Adam entered a room, the way she had found herself looking for him throughout the day. She had told herself her feelings were just gratitude, just the natural response to someone who had shown her kindness. But standing here now, with him looking at her with such vulnerable honesty, she realized she had been lying to herself. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. Adam's face transformed with joy and disbelief. "You do?" I did not want to admit it, even to myself. It seemed impossible. "You are Adam Garrett, and I am just a girl from Missouri who was scrubbing floors a week ago. But yes, when I am with you, I feel something I have never felt before, safe and seen and valued. Is that love? I do not know. I have never been in love before, but I think it might be." Adam reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, his grip gentle but firm. "I do not care about your past or where you came from. I care about who you are. You are brave and kind and intelligent and beautiful. You are everything I never knew I was looking for." They stood there holding hands, and then Adam carefully, slowly, lifted his other hand to cup her cheek. His touch was feather-light, reverent, as if she were something precious and fragile. He leaned in, and Violet's eyes fluttered closed as his lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that all week." "I am glad you did," Violet whispered. They stood together on the porch for a long time, talking in soft voices about everything and nothing. Adam told her about growing up on the ranch, about his dreams for its future. Violet told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her parents and her hopes for her students. They talked until the stars wheeled overhead and the night grew cold, and even then, they were reluctant to part. Over the next 2 weeks, as Violet prepared for her new teaching position, she and Adam spent as much time together as possible. He taught her to ride properly, patient with her fumbling attempts to control the horse and her nervous laughter when she nearly fell. They rode out across the ranch together, and he showed her his favorite spots: a hidden spring where cattle came to drink, a rocky outcropping that provided a view for miles in every direction. Eleanor watched their growing romance with obvious delight. "I am so happy for you both," she told Violet one afternoon as they sat in the garden shelling peas. "Adam has been so lonely since his father died. He threw himself into running the ranch and forgot to live. You have brought him back to life." "He brought me back to life," Violet countered. "I was drowning in that saloon and he pulled me out." "You saved each other," Eleanor said wisely. "That is the best kind of love." When the time came for Violet to move into the small house behind the church, she felt a pang of sadness at leaving the ranch. It had become home to her in a way she had not expected. But Adam helped her move her belongings, which now included several dresses Eleanor had insisted she keep, books for teaching, and a small collection of other necessities. The house was tiny, just 2 rooms, a combination kitchen and living area and a small bedroom. But it was clean and well-maintained, with a fireplace for heat and a small stove for cooking. It even had a window box that someone had planted with herbs. "It is perfect," Violet said, looking around with satisfaction. "It is small," Adam said doubtfully. "Are you sure you will be comfortable here?" "After the storage room at the Lucky Dollar, this feels like a palace. I have my own space, my own front door. It is more than I ever dreamed of having." Adam set down the last box and turned to face her. "I am going to miss seeing you every day." The ranch is only 5 miles away. You can visit, and I will visit you. It is not the same." He crossed to her and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I got used to having you there. Waking up and knowing I would see you at breakfast, finding you in the garden or on the porch, having you to talk to in the evenings. I am going to miss it too," Violet admitted. "But this is my dream, Adam. Teaching these children, I have to try." "I know, and I would never ask you to give up your dream. I am proud of you." He pulled back enough to look down at her. "But promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that this is not the end for us. That we will find a way to make this work. You pursuing your teaching and us being together." "I promise," Violet said, and she stood on her toes to kiss him. Teaching turned out to be everything Violet had hoped for and more challenging than she had anticipated. Her students ranged in age from 6 to 14, with varying levels of ability and interest. Some, like Sarah Miller, the blacksmith's daughter, were eager and bright, soaking up everything Violet taught. Others, like the Johnson boys, sons of a miner, had been sent to school grudgingly and spent more time causing trouble than learning, but Violet threw herself into the work with passion. She created lessons that made learning interesting, incorporating stories and games. She stayed patient with the slow learners and challenged the quick ones. She made a point to treat each child with respect and kindness, remembering how her own mother had made learning a joy rather than a chore. The townspeople of Silver Peak were initially skeptical of her. Word had gotten around that she had worked at the Lucky Dollar, and some of the more respectable ladies treated her with coolness. But as weeks passed, and they saw how dedicated she was to their children, how the students were learning and thriving under her care, attitudes began to shift. Adam visited several times a week, often bringing supplies or news from the ranch. The children quickly grew used to seeing him arrive in his wagon, and they would crowd around him, begging for stories about the ranch and the cattle drives. Adam took it all in stride, answering their questions with patience and occasionally bringing treats Rosa had baked. On Saturday evenings, when she did not have lessons to prepare, Violet would ride out to the ranch for dinner. Elena always welcomed her with open arms, and they would spend the evening talking and laughing. Afterward, Adam would walk her out to the porch, and they would steal precious moments together, kissing in the starlight and making plans for the future. 3 months into her teaching position, as autumn deepened into winter, Adam took Violet on a ride up to his favorite overlook. The weather was cold but clear, the sky a brilliant blue. They rode side by side, their horses picking their way carefully over the rocky terrain. At the top of the overlook, Adam dismounted and helped Violet down. The view was breathtaking, miles of high desert landscape spread out below them, the mountains purple in the distance. Adam spread a blanket he had brought and they sat together, close for warmth. "Violet, I need to ask you something," Adam said, and there was a nervousness in his voice she had rarely heard. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Violet's heart began to race as he opened it to reveal a gold ring set with a small but beautiful diamond. "This was my grandmother's ring. My father gave it to my mother when he proposed to her. She gave it to me and told me to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with." He took a deep breath. "Violet Thompson, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing I think about before I sleep. You have brought joy and light into my life in a way I never expected. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Violet's face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course I will marry you." Adam's whoop of joy echoed across the landscape as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Violet kissed him back with all the love and passion she felt for this man who had changed her life so completely. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and laughing, Adam cupped her face in his hands. "I promise I will spend the rest of my life making you happy. I will support your teaching and your dreams. I will never take you for granted. You will never scrub another floor or know another moment of one if I can help it." "I know," Violet said softly. "You have already given me so much. A new life, a purpose, love. I never thought I would find any of that when I arrived in Silver Peak, but you found me in that saloon and you saved me." "We saved each other," Adam said, echoing his mother's words from months ago. They rode back to the ranch in a state of euphoria, and Alina cried with happiness when they told her the news. She immediately began planning the wedding, talking about guest lists and flowers and food. Adam and Violet exchanged amused glances over her head, content to let her take charge. They were married on a clear day in December 1878, in the church where Violet taught. The small building was packed with people from Silver Peak and the surrounding ranches. Violet wore a beautiful white dress that Alina had worn at her own wedding, altered to fit Violet perfectly. Adam wore a new black suit, and when Violet walked down the aisle and saw him waiting for her, his face full of love and pride, she had to blink back tears. Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony, his voice warm and full of emotion. When Adam slid the wedding band next to her engagement ring and kissed her as husband and wife, the church erupted in applause. Violet felt like her heart would burst with happiness. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside despite the winter chill. Rosa and Alina had outdone themselves with food, and there was music and dancing and laughter. Violet's students attended with their families, excited to see their teacher married, and they presented her with a handmade quilt they had worked on in secret. As the sun set and the party continued, Adam pulled Violet away from the crowd and led her out to their favorite spot on the porch. The stars were beginning to appear overhead, and the sounds of celebration drifted on the cold air. "Happy, Mrs. Garrett?" Adam asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Happier than I ever thought possible, Mr. Garrett." They stood together watching the stars, and Violet thought about the journey that had brought her here. The loss of her parents, the desperate journey west, the degrading work at the saloon, and then the moment Adam had walked in and changed everything. She had been scrubbing floors, broken and hopeless, and he had said 4 words that had set her on the path to this moment. "You are done here." She smiled and leaned back against her husband's chest, feeling his warmth and strength surrounding her. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the following months. Violet continued teaching, and Adam ran the ranch with Lewis's help. They lived in the ranch house with Alina, who insisted she had more than enough room and enjoyed the company. In the evenings after dinner, they would sit together in the parlor. Alina worked on her needlepoint, Adam went over the ranch accounts, and Violet prepared lessons for the next day. In the spring, Violet discovered she was pregnant. She told Adam first, pulling him aside one evening after dinner and whispering the news. His face transformed with joy, and he picked her up and spun her around, laughing. Alina cried happy tears and immediately began planning for the baby's arrival. Violet continued teaching through most of her pregnancy, finally stopping in early September when she became too large to comfortably stand all day. The town council agreed that one of the older students, a bright girl named Mary, would help keep the younger children occupied during lessons, until Violet could return after the baby was born. The baby, a boy they named Thomas after Violet's father, arrived on a cold October morning in 1879. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Violet was sure she would not survive it. But Alina stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and encouraging her, and finally, Thomas arrived, red-faced and screaming. Adam was permitted into the room after the baby was cleaned and wrapped. And when Violet saw the expression on his face as he held his son for the first time, she fell in love with him all over again. He looked at Thomas with such wonder and tenderness, and then he looked at her with such gratitude and love that she had to blink back tears. "You did amazingly," he whispered, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "He is perfect. You are perfect." Thomas had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, and he was the most beautiful thing Violet had ever seen. In the following weeks, as she recovered from the birth and learned the rhythms of caring for an infant, she felt a contentment she had never known before. She had a husband who loved her, a son, a home and work that gave her purpose. When Thomas was 6 months old, Violet returned to teaching part-time, bringing the baby with her. Alina helped care for him during the day, and the students adored having a baby in the schoolhouse. Thomas would sleep in a cradle Violet kept near her desk, and when he woke, one of the older girls would walk with him and sing to him while Violet continued the lessons. The years passed peacefully. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and the animals. When he was 2, Violet became pregnant again, and this time she gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret, after Violet's mother. Margaret was quieter than her brother, with her father's green eyes and a thoughtful demeanor. Adam continued to build the ranch, expanding their land and increasing their herds. He was respected throughout the territory as an honest businessman and a fair employer. Violet's school flourished, with students coming from farther away as word spread about her excellent teaching. The little house behind the church became storage for school supplies, and Violet taught her lessons with her children playing nearby and her husband's portrait on her desk. Alina lived to see her grandchildren grow, delighting in them as she had delighted in having Violet as a daughter. She told stories about Adam as a boy and about Violet's mother, keeping those memories alive. She passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1885, and they buried her next to Adam's father on a hill overlooking the ranch she had loved. The loss hit them all hard, but especially Adam, who had lost both parents now. Violet held him through his grief, offering the same strength and comfort he had once offered her. They planted a garden in Alina's memory, full of the flowers and herbs she had loved, and they taught their children to tend it carefully. In 1886, Violet gave birth to their 3rd child, another boy they named William after Adam's father. William was a happy baby, content to watch the world with wide eyes and an easy smile. With 3 children and the school, Violet's days were full and busy, but she would not have changed anything. She would sometimes think back to that day in 1878 when she had been on her hands and knees scrubbing the saloon floor, hopeless and alone. It seemed like another lifetime now, like it had happened to someone else. That frightened, broken girl bore little resemblance to the woman she had become, a woman who was loved and valued, who had built a life full of purpose and joy. Adam would catch her sometimes with a faraway look in her eyes, and he would know what she was thinking. He would come up behind her and wrap his arms around her, pulling her close. "No regrets?" he would ask, even though he knew the answer. "Not a single one," she would always reply. As their children grew older, Thomas showed an interest in ranching and would ride out with his father to check on the cattle and mend fences. Margaret loved books and learning, and Violet suspected she would become a teacher herself someday. William, the youngest, was still too small to show his preferences, but he adored his older siblings and followed them everywhere. In 1890, when Thomas was 11, Margaret 8, and William 4, Violet made a decision. She had been teaching for 12 years now, and while she still loved it, she felt pulled to spend more time with her family. She announced to the town council that she would train a replacement and step back from full-time teaching. The announcement caused an uproar in Silver Peak. Parents protested, students cried, and the council begged her to reconsider. But Violet was firm. She would help train the new teacher and stay on part-time for a year to ensure a smooth transition, but her time as the primary teacher was coming to an end. The new teacher was a young woman from California named Helen, bright and enthusiastic, and deeply committed to education. Violet spent months working with her, showing her the methods that had worked, introducing her to the students and their families. By the end of the transition year, Violet was confident that the school was in good hands. On her last day of full-time teaching in 1891, the entire town turned out for a celebration in her honor. There were speeches and presentations, and her current and former students presented her with a beautiful leather-bound book filled with their drawings and letters expressing what she had meant to them. Violet cried reading through the book, touched beyond words by the impact she had made on so many young lives. That evening, back at the ranch, Adam found her on the porch, looking out at the sunset. He sat beside her and took her hand, now lined and work-worn but no longer raw and bleeding. "Any second thoughts?" he asked. "No, it is time. I want to be there for the children while they are young. Teaching will always be part of who I am, but being a mother and a wife comes first now." "You have been an incredible teacher," Adam said. "You have changed countless lives." "I hope so. I hope I gave those children what my mother gave me, a love of learning and a belief that education can change your life." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The years had been kind to them. Adam's dark hair was now shot through with silver at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes, but he was still the handsome man who had walked into a saloon and changed her life. Violet knew she had lines too, marks of laughter and worry and the passage of time, but Adam still looked at her with the same love and desire he had shown from the beginning. "You remember the day we met?" Violet asked softly. "Every detail. You were on your hands and knees scrubbing that filthy floor, and you looked up at me with these eyes full of exhaustion and weariness. I took one look at you and something inside me just knew you were meant to be mine." "I thought you were going to tell me I had missed a spot," Violet said with a laugh. "I wanted to burn that entire saloon down for what they were doing to you, making you work like that, sleep in that storage room, treating you like you were nothing. You deserved so much better. You gave me so much better. You gave me everything." Adam pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. Behind them, they could hear their children playing in the house, their laughter and shouts of play a sweet soundtrack to the evening. Rosa was cooking dinner, and the smell of her famous chicken stew drifted through the open windows. "What do you want to do now?" Adam asked. "Now that you have all this free time," Violet smiled. "I thought I might expand Aliner's garden. And I would like to write down some of my teaching methods, maybe compile a book that other teachers could use. And most importantly, I want to be here for you and the children. I want to make sure they grow up knowing they are loved and valued the way you made me feel loved and valued. They will never doubt it. You are the best mother they could have hoped for." As the stars began to appear overhead, Violet thought about the unpredictable journey of life. How a single moment, a single decision could change everything. If Adam had not come looking for her that day, if Aliner had not kept her promise to a childhood friend, where would she be now? Still scrubbing floors at the Lucky Dollar. Dead from illness or exhaustion or despair. But Adam had come. He had looked at her with kind eyes and said those 4 words that had opened the door to a new life. And she had been brave enough to walk through that door, to accept help when it was offered, to believe that she deserved better than what she had. Over the following years, Violet threw herself into being a full-time mother and ranch wife. She expanded the garden until it was one of the most beautiful in the territory, growing vegetables and herbs and flowers. She wrote her teaching manual, which was eventually published and used by teachers throughout Nevada and beyond. She helped Adam with the ranch accounts and planning, proving to have a good head for business. Thomas grew into a strong young man who loved ranching as much as his father did. He spent his days working alongside Adam and Lewis, learning everything there was to know about running a successful operation. Margaret developed into a beautiful and intelligent young woman who did indeed become a teacher, taking over from Helen when Helen married and moved away. William was the charmer of the family, quick with a smile and a joke, good with both animals and people. In 1895, when Violet was 37 and Adam 42, they welcomed a surprise addition to their family, a daughter they named Alina after Adam's mother. The children were delighted to have a baby sister, and she was doted on by everyone. Alina was a happy, curious child who seemed to carry her namesake's spirit, interested in everything and everyone. The territory of Nevada became a state in 1864, years before Violet arrived, but the wild nature of the West was still evident in the early 1890s. However, as the century drew to a close, things began to change. More families settled in the area. Silver Peak grew from a rough mining town into a proper community with paved streets and brick buildings. The railroad came closer, making it easier to ship cattle and receive supplies. But the Garrett Ranch remained a constant, a place of stability and family and hard work rewarded. Adam and Violet worked side by side to build something lasting, something they could pass down to their children and grandchildren. In 1898, Thomas married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, a sweet young woman named Sarah. They built a house on Garrett land and began their own family. Margaret was courted by a young lawyer from Reno who treated her with respect and shared her love of books. William, at 18, showed no signs of settling down, too busy charming every girl in 3 counties. Violet, at 40, found herself in the unexpected position of grandmother when Thomas and Sarah had their first child, a boy they named Adam after his grandfather. Holding her grandson for the first time, looking into his tiny face, Violet was overcome with emotion. This child carried her bloodline and Adam's, a continuation of the love story that had begun in a saloon 20 years ago. As the new century approached, Silver Peak and the Garrett Ranch prepared to enter the 20th century. There was electricity now in some buildings in town, talk of telephones being installed. The world was changing rapidly, becoming more modern and connected, but some things remained timeless. Love, family, hard work, and the satisfaction of building a good life. Violet watched her children and grandchildren with profound gratitude, knowing that every good thing in her life stemmed from that moment when Adam had walked into the Lucky Dollar, and seen her as a person worthy of rescue and respect. On New Year's Eve 1899, the entire extended Garrett family gathered at the ranch to celebrate the turn of the century. Thomas and Sarah were there with baby Adam and Sarah's family. Margaret came with her beau. William brought his latest sweetheart, a girl who would probably not last any longer than the previous ones. Young Alina, now 4, ran around excited by all the people and festivities. Adam had arranged for a huge dinner, and Rosa had outdone herself one last time before her retirement. She was getting older now, moving slower, and she had trained her daughter Maria to take over the cooking. But for this special night, Rosa had insisted on preparing the meal herself. As midnight approached, everyone gathered in the parlor. Adam stood and raised his glass of champagne. Violet stood beside him, and he pulled her close with his free arm. "I want to make a toast," Adam said, his voice carrying through the room. 20 years ago, I walked into a saloon in Silver Peak looking for a woman I had never met, someone my mother had promised to help. I expected to find someone who needed saving, someone broken and desperate, and I did find that. But I also found so much more. I found the woman who would become my wife, my partner, my best friend. I found the mother of my children and the love of my life. Violet, you have made these past 20 years the best years of my life. You brought joy and light and purpose into my days. You gave me a family and a reason to build something lasting. I love you more now than I did the day I married you, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." There was not a dry eye in the room as Violet blinked back tears. She looked around at her family, all the people who existed because she and Adam had found each other, and her heart swelled. "I do not have fancy words," Violet said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I want you all to know that every good thing in my life came from the moment your father walked into that saloon and saw me as worth saving. He gave me a future when I thought I had none. He gave me love when I felt unlovable. He gave me this family, this beautiful family, and for that, I will be grateful every day for the rest of my life." As midnight struck and the new century began, Adam kissed Violet deeply, and their children and grandchildren cheered. The 20th century had arrived, bringing with it unknown changes and challenges, but the Garrett family would face it together, rooted in the love story that had begun in the most unlikely of places. The years of the new century brought continued prosperity to the Garrett ranch. Adam, now in his late 40s, began to step back from the day-to-day operations, passing more responsibility to Thomas. Violet spent her time between the ranch and helping Margaret at the school, occasionally teaching special lessons on subjects she particularly loved. In 1905, Margaret married her lawyer and they settled in Silver Peak where he had opened a practice. William finally found the woman who could capture his restless heart, a rancher's daughter with a sharp wit and a good seat on a horse. They married in 1906 and built a house on the western edge of Garrett land. Young Eleanor, growing into a beautiful teenager, showed an interest in medicine, unusual for a young woman of that time. But Violet and Adam encouraged her interest, remembering how important it had been to have support for one's dreams. They arranged for Eleanor to apprentice with the doctor in Silver Peak, and she proved to have a real aptitude for healing. By 1910, Adam and Violet were in their early 50s, still healthy and active but aware that they were entering the later years of their lives. They had 5 grandchildren now, with more on the way, and the Garrett Ranch had become one of the most successful operations in Nevada. One evening in late spring, Violet and Adam rode out to the overlook where Adam had proposed 32 years earlier. The journey took longer now, their bodies not as spry as they once were, but the view was still as breathtaking. They sat on the same blanket Adam always brought, and Violet leaned against her husband's shoulder. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of gold and pink. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had not found you that day?" Adam asked. "Sometimes," Violet admitted, "but I do not dwell on it. That girl scrubbing floors in the saloon feels like someone else now from another lifetime. You gave me a chance at a real life and I took it. Everything that came after was built by both of us together." "We built something good, did we not?" Adam said, and there was satisfaction in his voice. "We built something wonderful," Violet corrected. A family, a legacy, a life full of love and purpose. Not everyone gets that. We are blessed. They watched as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared. Adam's arm was around her, solid and warm, and Violet felt the same flutter in her heart she had felt the first time he kissed her all those years ago. "I love you, Violet Garrett," Adam said softly. "Today, tomorrow, and always." "I love you too," Violet replied. "You are my hero, my partner, my everything. Thank you for walking into that saloon. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life." They stayed on the overlook until full dark, talking quietly about their children and grandchildren, about the past and the future, about all the things that matter when a life has been well lived and full of love. When they finally rode back to the ranch house, lights glowing warm in the windows and family waiting inside, Violet felt a profound sense of completeness. Her journey had taken her from the depths of despair to heights of happiness she could never have imagined. She had been saved by love, had built a life through love, and would leave a legacy of love that would continue through her children and their children. The story that had begun with "You are done here" had become a story of redemption, of second chances, of love conquering hardship. And as Violet dismounted from her horse with Adam's steadying hand on her arm, as she walked into her home filled with the sounds and smells of family, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found her happy ending. Years continued to pass in gentle succession. The Garrett family grew as grandchildren married and great-grandchildren arrived. The ranch prospered under Thomas's management, and he proved to be as capable and fair-minded as his father. Margaret's school became known throughout the state for excellence, and she trained dozens of young teachers who carried her methods throughout Nevada. William and his wife raised their children with a perfect blend of discipline and fun. Young Eleanor became one of the few female doctors in Nevada, opening a practice in Silver Peak that served the community with distinction. Adam and Violet grew old together with grace and gratitude. Their hair turned silver, their bodies slowed, but their love remained constant. They spent their days surrounded by family, watching their legacy unfold in the lives of their descendants. In 1920, when Violet was 62 and Adam 67, they celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary with a huge party at the ranch. 5 children, 18 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren gathered to honor the couple whose love story had started everything. Thomas stood to give a toast, his own hair now showing silver. "My parents built more than a ranch," he said. "They built a family rooted in love, respect, and hard work. Every good thing we have, every opportunity we have been given, exists because 42 years ago my father walked into a saloon and saw a woman who needed help. But more than that, he saw a woman worth loving. And my mother was brave enough to accept that love and build a life from it. They taught us that where you start does not matter nearly as much as where you finish, and they are finishing strong." The party lasted long into the night, with music and dancing and stories shared across generations. Violet sat in a comfortable chair, watching her family with deep contentment. Adam sat beside her, holding her hand as he had held it through thousands of days and nights. "Are you happy?" Adam asked, leaning close so only she could hear. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," Violet replied, squeezing his hand. "You gave me everything I never knew I needed." "You gave me the same," Adam said. "I was just running a ranch before you. You taught me what it meant to really live." As the celebration continued around them, Violet reflected on the incredible journey of her life. From the scared, desperate girl scrubbing saloon floors to this moment, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, All here because she had been brave enough to accept help when it was offered and love when it was given. Adam and Violet lived many more years together, growing older but never losing the essential connection that had sparked that day in 1878. They remained partners and lovers and best friends until the end. When Adam finally passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1928 at the age of 75, Violet mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had lived a full life together, and the family they had created would carry on their legacy. Violet followed him just 2 years later in 1930, at the age of 72. She died surrounded by her children in the ranch house that had been her home for over 50 years. Her last words were about Adam, about how she was ready to see him again, how she had missed him every day since he had gone. They were buried side by side on the hill overlooking the Garrett Ranch, next to Adam's parents. The entire town of Silver Peak turned out for the funeral, along with countless former students and their families. Person after person spoke about the impact Violet had made on their lives, about her kindness and wisdom, and the way she had believed in people even when they did not believe in themselves. The Garrett Ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family. The story of Adam and Violet became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The great-great-grandchildren would sit wide-eyed hearing about their great-great-grandmother, who had been scrubbing floors in a saloon when their great-great-grandfather walked in and changed her life with 4 simple words: "You are done here." Those words had meant the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. They had been an act of kindness that blossomed into love and created a legacy that would last for generations. And somewhere on a hill overlooking a Nevada ranch, 2 headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of a man and woman who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. Their story was one of the best the Wild West had to offer. Not a tale of gunfights and gold rushes, but something better. A story of love conquering hardship, of second chances, of 2 people who saved each other and built a life worth living. And that story, passed down through their children and their children's children, would live on long after the Wild West itself had passed into history.